we'll get going. Great. So welcome everybody back to our mental fitness series, and we're on our 6th session. And I'm Jenny Pelling. I'm the Director of Apprenticeship Development and Diversity here at Kaplan. And today I have no camera, but I do have sound. So I'll be in the background speaking and checking the chat and the Q&A for Ross McWilliam, who is our expert speaker from Mindset Pro. And we're thrilled to have Ross back with us again for this 6th session on dealing with conflict. A session I've been really waiting for and interested to go through with you, Ross, as I'm sure we all are. So we've got a good group of 70 people. Do put messages in the Q&A and chat, and I'll pick those up with Ross as we go through. Over to you, Ross.
Thank you, Jenny. Even though we can't see you, you're inclusive with us, diversity, inclusion, so you're always with us. And the same goes to everybody else. I might ask you some questions today. I'll hopefully play some videos, but use the chat box as well, please. Okay, so let's get started. I know what you're thinking. What time do we finish? That's about quarter to one today. So what we're doing, we're talking about dealing with conflict personally and professionally. There's a bit of crossover in this today. And I actually delivered this session. I was speaking to Jenny last week. I delivered it in Surrey last week, and there was some really good feedback. And I've taken the nuggets out of that, and hopefully you'll get a good feel for this. What I did in a day, I can do in 40 minutes for you guys. So we all start off with a group agreements, making you feel safe and secure. Again, that referenced inclusion, diversity, respecting people's viewpoints. And as Jenny said, you'll get the copy of the slides afterwards. And if you want to email me any questions, I'm hanging around at the end, or if you're in a rush, send me the emails either direct to me or via Jenny. I want to make sure you're nice and relaxed, because when we're relaxed, we learn better. So I talk about releasing dopamine. Dopamine is the reward hormone that helps us learn. And when we're relaxed and we feel comfortable and we think there's something in it for us, and this is knowledge today, it's easier to learn. So I'm going to put it out there to people. You've got an option of 2 things to release some dopamine in your minds or in somebody else's. So I want you to do either one, tell me something you're proud of that you've done this week, or give a compliment to somebody else. Okay, so that can be in the chat box or just verbally. Yeah, so just to remind you, tell me something that you've done that makes you proud, or give a compliment to somebody else in the room. And I'll start us off, say, Jenny, we might not be able to see you, but I can certainly hear you, and that gives me nice confidence and support knowing you're with me today.
Well, back at you, Ross. It's always a pleasure working with you, and you're an absolute professional, and I relish these sessions. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining.
Is there anything in the chat box, Jenny?
Lots. People have passed exams. There have been people organising friends' parties. Got a lovely one here about people making progress to achieving goals. And Alison impressively ran a marathon. Sia ran a half marathon. So a good active group here.
Good. And does anybody want to talk to me direct?
Well, it's got to go through the chat actually. Somebody's a really lovely one actually. Somebody saw their colleague and she was so smiley and happy it made their day. Impressive.
Keep reading them out, Jenny. But you know what I would say is that the human mind has between, if it depends where you read, 6,000 to 30,000 thoughts a day. And within those thoughts, we can have 70% negativity. And there is a tendency as human beings to protect ourselves, looking for that negative threat all the time. So this is just an exercise to say, we're in a safe environment. Let's celebrate the good stuff. Let's look at what we're doing really well and what we're going to do really well. And let's get that dopamine going out there. So I can see, 23 people in the chat there, nearly a quarter of us have did something positive, and that'll help our learning process. Okay, let's move on then. Let's move on to the next bit. I want you to be brave today. Although it's online, it's still being brave. You've been brave already, putting things in the chat box. Again, if you want to speak to me, you can do. But we ask you to think about confrontation. Okay, it sounds to be a very negative word, but can be very positive. And to give you a very silly example, you can have 2 boys who are upset in the playground, maybe even sadly fighting. But often when it's all over, the scuffle, they become best friends, and often best friends for many long years. So confrontation can yield a much closer togetherness. So I just want you to remember that as we go through this today. You might be dealing with conflict at the moment and confrontation, but there are options. Okay, and Brené Brown talks about Brave in the Wilderness. It's a great book, and it's very simple about standing up for yourself and trusting your gut. Okay. So most people don't like confrontation, yeah? And there'll be some people who say, I don't mind it, but many people, when they say, do you like confrontation? It's no, okay? But if I said to you, there are some benefits of confrontation, can you have a think for a second? And if you want to put them in the chat box, think of any benefits of confrontation. Okay, so I'm going to open that chat box so I can see as well.
Learn how to deal with things better.
Okay, you can read them out to us, Jenny. I like that support from you.
Change of mindset. Nice one here from Natalie. Develop communication skills and confidence. Lynn, opposing views. Clearing the air. Yeah. Reality is always kinder, Shabs. Interesting comment. Yeah. Clarity of thought. Yeah, some lovely comments there. Yeah. Obtain mutual understanding. Good one, Susanna.
Yeah, we could both be on the same page, but we don't know we're on the same page. Yeah. And I think if you have that preset in your mind that it can be a good thing, maybe not always initially, but once you work through it, it can be a very long-lasting solution to it. Okay, and I put some benefits of confrontation on the screen now. Let's just see if you can cross-reference in your own mind if you've got some of these. Okay, let's have a look. Better communication, I think we talked about that one. Better workplace efficacy, like productivity, efficiency. Less absenteeism, yeah, and presenteeism means that you're at work, but you're not really present. It's almost like a zombie state at times. So we're actually focusing at work. Better emotional mental health, and that's really important, especially as a result of the pandemic. Better engagement and enjoyment, and these all link into each other, don't they? Once you have one, you generally have another one. Creating a future pathway to resolve, as opposed to a history of driving a wedge deeper. And that's really a powerful statement, isn't it, that? Because once we get in that habit of creating wedges and differences and separation, that might become a habit that we're doing anyway. Yeah. So always looking to resolve. And again, I think I've mentioned in a slide later on, but 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey talks about 7 things, obviously, but then talks about having a win-win situation. And if you can win-win by resolving a conflict and a confrontation, then everybody's on the same page better. So that's what we're really driving at today. And if we don't face the confrontation, many times it's like sweeping something under a carpet. And if we do that, it's not a good way to resolve anything. It's just going to get worse. So this slide is telling us it's good to confront the confrontation, to resolve it if we can. Now, that could be personal conflict. And often we can take things personally. Depends on our mood and where we are in our lives, and what job we're in and what role and what colleagues we've got. Sometimes, it can be quite personal. It's meant that way, but most often it's not. But we can interpret that way and take it as a personal attack. Okay. So just this awareness that it may or may not be something personal. And there's 3 reasons why this happens. They're at fault, you're at fault, or nobody's at fault. Okay, because sometimes our automatic standpoint is, have I done something wrong? Okay, and it could be, but often it might be somebody else. And equally, it might be nobody's at fault, just this miscommunication. So that's your first stance. Don't take it too personally. There could be other reasons why this appears to be what it appears to be. Now, these are the questions you can ask yourself if you think you might be at fault. Where is the evidence that I'm in the wrong? And it's a really simple statement, this one, but it's so true. We can make things up in our minds, 70% negative thoughts. So where is the evidence? Let's drill down and find some evidence if I'm in the wrong. Am I new to the role, company, type of work? Am I in that learning phase? Okay, seek and support phase. Could I have done something differently? Okay. Could I have responded differently to that? Could I have created a different outcome? Did I create more conflict initially by being confrontational or just ignoring it? Did I prolong the conflict? And often one of my jobs in the past was commercial manager in professional football. And sometimes we get different requests in for different memorabilia if I was on the commercial side. And often if we didn't deal with it quickly when it first came in and sent some information out or a memento out, it can drag on and on and on. And what started off as very small can grow into something quite big in a matter of days. So I can honestly say that in my personal experience, I did prolong conflict, but it wasn't intentional, but I was much more aware after that fact. Is it just my personality or style of working? Okay, and making sure we fit in that company organization. And I think they're interesting questions, this, not to absolve you from responsibility, but to take the pressure off you somewhat, because we always look at ourselves first. And is it something that you're struggling with at home and at work that's seeping into your workplace, especially? Yeah. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Personal conflict could be them questions. So it's not you, it could be them. Are they usually like this? Is this the type of line manager I've got? Are they under pressure at home or at work? Is there a history of confrontation with the company culture? Is there a history of confrontation within your role? Okay, so these questions would maybe soften it somewhat to think, you know what, there might be some reasoning why this is happening. Is the company undergoing change? And when we undergo change, like in the pandemic, things can be a bit more fraught and confrontation and conflict can be more apparent. Okay. And finally, nobody at fault. Yeah. What can I put in this category? Yeah. The company culture, misunderstandings, deadlines, understaffed. Yeah. Okay, so let's move away from that. And there's a book I read about a good 10 years ago, and it's by Susan Scott, and she talks about fierce conversations. And the picture there is of a group of trawlermen, and she uses this example, which I'm going to tell you about now. She talks about the captain of the ship being very good friends with the owner of the ship. So the owner was on land, and the captain on sea, and they went out and they caught fish. And they got on really well, best friends and work colleagues. But there was becoming a problem, and the problem didn't get resolved. And this is what the problem was. The captain was asked to collect more fish and to go to different trawling grounds, maybe further afield. And the owner, wanted to keep his revenue up. So the captain says, yeah, I'll do that. And then the captain changed his mind. He didn't want to risk going out too far, because if they went too far and didn't get the fish, that's more cost and time and expense. And he kept sort of telling little lies to the owner on the harbour and saying, we didn't find anything today, we're trying to go out a bit further. And eventually it became a situation where the boat was becoming unprofitable. So Susan Scott came in and she said, you need to have these direct conversations. And the first conversation was from the owner, let's go to these further grounds. I don't mind about the loss in the short term. If we get the good shoals of fish in the longer term, then everybody's a winner. And so the ship captain didn't want to upset the owner, but the owner then became very clear, take the risk, take the gamble, let's go out there and let's try it. And when they had that conversation, everybody was on the same page. And it sort of freed them up to express themselves. And eventually they got to the shoals of fish and they made money. So she talks about the 6 principles of fierce conversations. And I'll just go through these very briefly for you. Master the courage to interrogate what's really happening. Come out from behind yourself, from your relationship as a friend, perhaps, and make it real. Be prepared to state what it is now. Tackle the tougher challenge today. And your instincts, if you're covering something up to stop your friendship, that's telling you something, to face it and confront it. Yeah. So that was her principles. In reality, she talked about this, name the issue. Okay. And this issue was, we're not getting enough fishing at the moment. Okay. And we're not going further enough afield to do that. So we need to go to those further out shoals. And they say, I'm a bit nervous about going out there because it costs more money and more time. Yeah, and we've both got a lot to lose in this one. Number 5, identify your contribution to the problem is that, can I keep all my crew happy as well? If we don't get the fish, will they still get paid? Indicate the goal to resolve the issue. The goal is to be brave, to get out there and search out these new grounds. And then ask the owner then, is that okay? Is that okay if we do that and take a few more risks? Now, I like that sort of statement, but over the years, I've sort of made it very different. And I've talked about this role play opportunity. So I'm going to try this with you guys now. Okay. So I talk about this practical scenario, empathy driven. Okay. And I'm just going to take it off for a second. So I want you to see me. And it's something that I do quite often. And if I've got an issue with somebody at work or even in my social life, I'll say, I want to talk to you about this issue. Okay. First of all, though, I want to hear your view of it. And then I want to share my perspective. And I know together, if we understand each other, we can resolve this. And we've both got a lot to win. And we've both got quite a bit to lose as well. And it'll take as long as it takes. This is important. So if we don't finish it and resolve it today, we'll do it again tomorrow, next week, till it gets resolved. Then at the end of the day, we're doing it for the sake of our profitability, for our company, for our employees, for our crew members. So that's something that I have sort of done over the years, and I can say it without referring to the slides. If I go back to the slides now, and you can see that, that's what I just said to you guys, okay? And it's a difficult one to do online in the practical scenario, but all I suggest to you, if you get the notes on this afterwards, just practice this. If you're in a line manager position with somebody you're dealing with, to go through these 7 stages. It doesn't matter if you don't get them exactly right. The main thing is you're confronting the challenge. You want their view. You want to share your view. There's a lot at stake, but a lot to win. Don't mind about time, but at the end of the day, it's about the company. It's about the crew in this case. So that is something that I've found very powerful. And if it's done in a nice measured way, non-aggressive, nice and steady pace, I think you get the good results from this. Okay. It's very difficult to do online. I was thinking about it before, but just want to put that there for a second with anybody. Any comments on anybody from the chat box on that one? This lady, Susan Scott's very, very successful. She's runs around the corporate world globally. And she says, if we don't have those conversations, then things just fester, like that carpet I told you before. Any observations about that? Could you use that in your day-to-day work, or is it something that's a bit too much for you to confront? Any statements on that one at all?
A resounding yes from Agatha.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to this thing of being brave, If you don't
question, actually, Ross, if you can, how do you go about it if someone doesn't allow you time to give the perspective, to give your perspective?
Well, then you've got a bigger problem than what's in front of you. Most professional people want to hear both sides of the story or what they perceive to be both sides. And you can ask them again, we need to share both sides of this story so we're on the same page, and keep mentioning that thing that's together, what binds you together, the company, the same page, the clients, those sort of things are the common goals. And if they're not accepting those common goals, then that might be a situation you do escalate it up to your line manager that you've tried to confront this and talk about it, but they're being very one-dimensional. But again, be patient, be kind, be generous, be a good listener, which we're going to shortly. And this might help you achieve this, but you've got to share both sides of the story. And sometimes there's no resolution. It's just the hearing and listening process that becomes that bonding connection.
Yeah. We might come back to it if we can. We've got a few questions about this, actually, about what if they deny their contribution, how would it change if you've got particularly younger members of the team, for example? So should we keep those questions at the end?
Yeah, the good idea, Jenny. Okay. Let's move it on then. Okay. So effective communication, you might not be surprised to hear this, it's not about words. Words only contribute 7% about how we communicate. So you might say all the right words, but it's not getting that message across. Again, obviously the body language and the face movements, the 10,000 facial expressions we can make, according to Dr. Paul Ekman. So that's very important, but it's also your voice, your tone, your pace. This is very apparent if you're dealing on the phone to somebody, because you can't see the body language and the words are only 20% maximum effective on the phone. What people are doing on the phone is listening to, are you upset? Are you impatient? Are you angry? And they're picking up from that tone and that pace of your voice. So communication, as much as you think the telephone's good and quick, it doesn't give you that complete picture. But when we do get the face-to-face stuff, it's not always about the words. And that's a very powerful statement. So just think about that. And there's a term they use quite a bit when we're communicating. It's congruence. Congruence between your body movements, your facial expressions, your words and your tone. Does it all fit together, or are you trying to tell a lie? And a good example of this, when people aren't congruent, when somebody doesn't even speak, and a young child might come up to a person and say, why are you angry? And they haven't said a word, but they get that feeling they're angry. They don't have to hear the words. They can see it in the face and in the body movements. Okay, so let's move it on then. We're doing really well. I've got a little video here, and this is 3 minutes long, and it talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. And the why I put this in here, because to get this confrontation resolved, we need good listening skills. And often in life, we don't listen. We listen to interrupt, listen to hijack. So rather than being sympathetic to somebody, which we might think is good, that's done to somebody, empathy is where we listen with them. It's about 2.5 minutes long. Let's see if we can get through this, guys. Here we go.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, let's just see me for a second. A very powerful video. And at the end there, it talks about not often can we solve anything in that moment. We might do it in the future, but very often than not, it's about being connected, being on that same side, showing that empathy. And empathy, in Brené Brown's word, is feeling with somebody, not feeling to somebody, for somebody. Yeah, at least you can do this, at least you can do that. So the two main points of that video are, often we can't solve things, certainly initially, and it could be just being connected. And when that connectivity, just be with somebody. And that could be the solution in itself, yeah, rather than feel sorry for somebody. Any observations on that for anybody at all? Any comments from you, Jenny?
That comment about not using at least is it's a really important check for me, actually. I think I've done that in the past, I'm afraid to say, but I'm going to recognize it now.
Yeah. Well, let's just consolidate that learning then. It's difficult, as I said, to get some interaction online, but I think we can still get some learning. So if I talk about when you're having these conversations with people, think about position. You don't always have to have this confrontation face to face. In fact, that could create more confrontation. Some people sit at 90 degrees, like on a coffee table between you at angles, or you can sit facing the same direction, like in a car on a park bench. Yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition where actually we could get better engagement when you're not looking directly at somebody. And, sit upright. I'll give you a clue about body language. Don't cross anything or don't touch your face. When we touch our face, for some body language experts like Alan and Barbara Pease, they'll say it's a sign that we're covering something up. And again, if you want to be very open, with your hands very open, like you've got your hands up and you don't have a gun, for instance, when you show the palms of your hand, when you talk with your hands, that's always a good sign that you're not concealing something. Emptying. Emptying means, going back to Susan Scott about, I want to hear your view, don't hijack that. Let people talk. And if they have a break, keep that break and hold that space, yeah? Hold that space for someone to completely empty. Again, let's go back to what I said before. Often people just want to get it out there, yeah? And if you just keep stopping them and hijacking them, but this, but that, at least this, at least that, they haven't emptied. So you must let somebody empty to get the full, complete view of something, yeah? And if you're a very good manager, you'll hold that space until they've finished. And you might want to say, is there anything else? That's to say, are we near the end? In a nice way, is there anything else you want to add? Okay. Open questions, tell me more, yes and nods. So you might not want to speak, you just might want to be active listening by yes and nodding. And it's saying to people, keep emptying, keep emptying. And I think once you understand that skill, that could resolve maybe as many things as you think, maybe 70 or 80% of a confrontation. Somebody just having the ability to get it out there, to be heard. Most people want to be heard. And that can be the foundation of solving something. Moving in closer, pushing yourself a bit close to somebody else shows you're interested. Very subtle. It's like a nuance of body language. But when you move in, as opposed to leaning back, which means you're probably not interested, be careful of that relaxation point. You can summarize very shortly and briefly, hence the name summarizing. And again, I'll say it once more. Don't jump in on somebody if they haven't finished speaking. Accept those quiet pauses, those pregnant pauses, or I call them tumbleweed moments. That's okay, that quietness. It's saying you've got permission to add anything else you want to add to it. So anytime you can practice that, that's a great skill. And all you have to remember from this slide is let people talk. It's very powerful. Now,
on that, actually, Ross, and really, there's a really good observation in from Matthew on that about people often intend to and want to be empathetic. They're worried about saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, saying less is better. So don't worry about, if you say too much, then there's a chance you could trip yourself up, but say less. And that goes back to my original point. Let somebody empty. Let them go, let them speak. And then, is there anything else? Do you want to add a bit more? And then you'll probably get them feeling more happy with the situation. They've got their view across. So I wouldn't worry about saying the wrong thing, but less is often more. And I think if you have that principle, it will serve you much better than trying to be too clever and put the key words in and hijack somebody when you don't think you're hijacking them. I hope that answers that sort of question there on that subject. Don't be too scared of saying the wrong thing, because if you say less, there's less chance of saying the wrong thing, but you're trying to get them to empty. Contrition, yielding, and common ground. When we're sorry and we're yielding a little bit to find that common ground. Here's some great phrases. So if you do, going back to your last question, you think you might have said something wrong, or somebody comes back to you, forgive me, I am sorry. I didn't realize you felt like that. For some people, they say sorry is the hardest word. It's a cliche, but many cliches are often true. So if you can get into that practice, forgive me for interrupting. Was there anything else you want to add? I'm sorry, I didn't see it that way. I didn't realize you felt like that. They are good sort of catch-all phrases you can use if you think you've made an error. But if you haven't made an error, forgive me. Would you like to carry on? I think it's a very powerful statement. It's showing that empathy. Given what you've told me, I would feel the same way. But there are some more pieces to the jigsaw, the current situation. So that's like a bridging conversation statement, yeah? Given what you've told me, you know, I would feel the same way as you, but maybe I haven't got the full perspective on it yet. Would you allow me to share that? So when you say words like allow me, you're asking permission. And when you ask permission from people, it gives them a bit of power. And often people, whether you know it or not, they want a bit of power. So if you give them to them with the phrases and setting your stall out in this way, can I share a bit more information with you? It becomes very powerful and engaging. Yeah, it's showing that you can yield without lying down and giving in. Yeah, there's a big difference between the two there. Can we agree to disagree on this particular point? Can we come back to it in the future? Here's a good phrase. Can we park that for now? It's really important. And I want to park it. It's so important. I want to come back to it the next time we talk. So you don't have to solve everything at once. You can break it down like the jigsaw piece, but can we park it? It's a really good phrase, that. Yeah. And have you ever used that, Jenny? Can we park that for now and then come back to it?
Something similar. Can we come back to that? Can we circle back to it when we've got more time? Yeah.
Yeah. It's very powerful. And sometimes it's this position of empathy and a few phrases and this yielding contrition that allows people to feel comfortable with you. They don't see as much as the enemy, more you're working together. Is there anything else that people use, any phrases or any statements you've seen, or any key words that helps to engage people? Anything there? It's a difficult question, but I thought I'd stay for a few seconds, see if anyone's got an answer. Anything else that people want to share? Obviously, using somebody's name is very powerful as well. Yeah, the first name is very important if that's the way they want to be talked to. And I think, you know, given that situation, that informality is very powerful. Okay, nothing coming through the chat box. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just move it on a little bit. Okay. I do some stuff for Granada TV and over the years since the pandemic started, and I've got a little video which Jenny's seen, and I'm on this show with a woman called Lucy Meacock, and she asked me a question about, I talk about happiness hour. Everybody should have a happiness hour each day. And she comes back to me in almost a vitriolic way, in quite an aggressive way. I wanted to see this and see what I do to sort of soften it, to yield. Okay.
Lots of subtle signs. Stomach being upset quite regularly. Pulses in the chest. Change is the key word. Change in sleeping pattern, eating, drinking. An interesting one is exercise. So people think, I'm not burning out, I'm exercising even more now. There's an obsessive nature to that. That could be just a window to some stress-related disease. Crying is a good one. Somebody who cries a lot when didn't used to cry, and vice versa. And there's lots of different things around that personality that, you know, avoidance is a big one, avoiding something we didn't used to avoid. So there are signs, we've got to slow down and look for them and then take some action. I'm a big advocate of what's called happiness hour every day. For an hour, do something where you're not thinking about something that's upsetting you.
When the heck does anyone have time for a happiness hour?
Well, that's a
With
secret.
mobile phones, laptops, your boss on the phone asking what's going on, where are you, why aren't you at an appointment? People don't have time for a happiness hour, do they?
I was a bit like you, but I've come around to the opinion you've got to make time for that. And it doesn't have to be exactly an hour, but something where you're doing something where you're not thinking about and obsessing about something that is.
I'm going to take it off for a second, guys. Anybody notice something about my body language, my face, when she came back to me? And then what sort of phrase did I use? Can anybody give me an answer on that one at all?
Lynn says it's when you said, I was a bit like you. A couple of people picked that one and you smiled.
Yeah, I was a bit like, I was trying to put myself on the same side. I was a bit like you. I met her halfway, didn't I? Yeah. But when she gave me the confrontation, what did my face do, first of all?
People noticed that you smiled and you quite relaxed.
Yeah. Rather than move away, rather than get angry and hunch up, I smiled, yeah, and nodded. And nodding is saying, I agree with you before I've said I agree with you. So a smile and nod, that's fine. Yeah. And in the end, I didn't show the whole tape, but I said, I found some common ground. I said, well, if you can't do it each day, maybe once or twice a week, maybe at the weekends. So that's my resolution for her. But again, it's not getting caught up in the emotions. It's very powerful there, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So, I've got a little case study here. I'm just checking the time. We've got about 10 minutes left yet. I'll see if we can get through this. A customer asks you for a meeting regarding, sorry, I'll spell that right next time, regrading the progress of a project. You prepare notes, performance targets, criteria, responsibilities. You meet the customer and quickly sense a negative tone. The focus of their anger is on you and why the company is not making much progress. So already you're sensing this. How do you deal with this passive or active aggression? And how do you communicate effectively regarding the process, the progress of this project? Does anybody have a quick look at that and maybe put some in the chat box for us there? There are some simple things we can do straight away based on the information I've given you already. I'm being a bit hard on you today, aren't I? Putting you on the spot a bit like this. But I think I'd rather do this and face the confrontation, get the pun, rather than just sweep under the carpet. So I'll keep quiet for a second or two. Is there anything in the chat box you can share with us there, Jenny?
Yeah, people saying find a common ground, listen. Alison says, let them say everything that they have to say, that concept of emptying that you told us about earlier. Leanne, keep calm.
Yeah, all good stuff.
Reaffirm, yeah.
Reaffirm.
Say you understand.
Yeah, do you understand? Are you on the same page? Reaffirming something. And again, all that stuff is very specific and precise, and it's brilliant. Yeah. If I just take a step back and say, where does this happen? And I would say when somebody has this tone, you feel something, get them in a private space where you've got the door closed and you've got that privacy to have that conversation. And I think location is very key. Not just do it in an office, people are walking by, get the privacy, give them some respect, and you ask permission. And you say, would you like to sit in the office and we can sit down and discuss it? And if it's appropriate, you can make a cup of tea or coffee, but get in there, sit down. And then I would say to somebody, this is very important to both of us. I'll probably use a Susan Scott. I really want to hear your viewpoint. Then if I can add to that and share from our point of view from the company, I will do. And it's very important. So do you want to sit down? Would you like to sit down? And I want to hear what you think about this situation. So the setting is very critical. It's saying to the person they're important, and it's asking permission, would you like to? And all the other things we just said then in the chat box will come and add a bit more weight behind that conversation. So I think that's really powerful to get that setting first and then to engage with them. And also, here's a simple thing I haven't really mentioned so far, trying to sit down. When we sit down, we can be less aggressive. Yeah. So sitting down is very powerful for us as well. Okay. Some good stuff here. Some top tips then. We're coming towards the end. And ask yourself the question, are you part of the problem or part of the solution? Or do you need to escalate this? And I was with the head teacher on Friday and she said, yeah, I like people confronting it and talking about it. But if it goes on and on and it's not being solved, by the time it gets to me, it becomes a real big challenge. Yeah, she didn't say a problem, a challenge. So she was saying to her staff, have a try at working out, but if you don't think you're going to make progress, touch base with me before you let it drag on. I think that's a really good statement, that one. So any confrontation, prepare collectively before the engagement be organized. Have the data, have the resources, have the viewpoints. Yeah, if you don't have that, it looks like you're disorganized. Know what you want, or what you want to settle for. And that could be, yeah, this is the outcome I want. Okay, I want to settle for this if I don't get that. And this is the time frame I've got. And if I can't do it in this time frame, as Susan Scott said, we'll make some time extra, because it's a really important thing for us to get on the same page. Don't fight with the same team. So that could be something where you're in the same team and you're scoring points against each other when you're facing a common opposition. So please don't fight with your same team. And that could be subtle statements or giveaway messages. But as I said before, words aren't that powerful. Your body language and your face is. So make sure you're congruent with somebody else's speak. Lean in, don't cross, don't touch the face. We mentioned that before. Open questions, tell me a bit more, rather than is it yes or is it no? You know, don't make ultimatums, because ultimatums very rarely work. Because many times with an ultimatum, people are upset and the adrenaline's flowing. They might want to say the right answer, but they can't. So no ultimatum questions, please. Look for the Covey Win-Wins. Okay. It's okay to disagree on some points. Park it, as we said before. Okay, so these are some of the good things to talk about. So what have we learned today? Things to avoid. Physical or passive aggression. We haven't really touched on that, but the passive aggression is very powerful. Yeah. Poor body language, if not interested, insightful, lethargic, poor eye contact. So not looking at somebody is poor. Looking at for someone too long is a stare. So over 3 seconds is a stare. So be careful of that staring at somebody. Interrupt others, like the hijacking, it's a big no-no. Ultimatum questions, trying to force somebody's hand. You might get them to do something, but they won't buy into it. And you want people to intrinsically motivate you to change, not extrinsic by a threat. Arriving late or quick to leave, such a big problem that. It's not even about words, is it? It's your actions. Threats. Okay, so what have we really learned today then? Lean in, body language, congruence between your words, your face, and your body. Face confrontation actively. And Susan Scott says, painting that picture of asking them, sharing your viewpoints, we're on the same side, there's no time limit, rolling it in the one side together. Hold the space for emptying, use empathy. Sometimes there is no solution, it's just the connection. When you connect with someone, there's more likely they're going to work out a solution together. Inquiring questions. Okay. I'm just checking my watch. We've come nicely to the end there. Jenny, that's some things for you to talk about. And when you've done that, I'll put my face on the screen.
Lovely. Thank you, Ross. Yes, absolutely. This is one of the areas that we support our apprentices and our learners, but there are others. We've got some microsite links where we've got additional resources for you. And obviously, if there's something that's a safeguarding concern, please do reach out to us immediately to that safeguarding@kaplan.co.uk email address. The next of these sessions is going to be on the 1st of March at 12 o'clock on our mental fitness program of overcoming exam anxiety. I know a lot of our participants today are facing exams in the next few months, so please do join us for that. I've put in the chat a survey form, and we'd be really grateful if you could take a moment to respond to that, because that helps us know what else you'd like in the future and what you've particularly valued about these sessions. So please do complete that for us. Thank you very much, and over to you, Ross.
Well, thanks very much for we haven't quite finished yet. I want to give you your money's worth. So if anybody's got any questions, either verbally or through the chat box, please do that now. If there's something that wasn't quite connecting with you, but I think we, given the subject and confrontation, I think we covered quite a few key points. So I'm going to keep quiet for a second and see if anybody wants to ask any questions or make some observations.
Lots of positives. Linda, you're very welcome. Lovely to have you on the call. Thank you for joining. Lots of positives to this, people finding it of practical benefit. We had one question we couldn't get to. Oh, one from Matt. How do you deal with conflict by email?
Yeah, I saw that. And again, people can say things in email, often rushed, and it's hurried, and it's a response, it's a knee-jerk reaction. Some people call this strategic inaction, not replying to an email straight away to let the other person calm down a little bit, to reflect a little bit, to help them reflect. So I think there's merit in that. If it's going beyond, half a day, then it could be misconstrued as not being interested. But I think there is merit for a few hours to let pass before you come back to it. And always start with that, forgive me, I've just picked up your email now. Can I deal with it now, or do I give them option of face-to-face? And then it comes back to them, oh, I'd like to deal with it now. And then you can talk about it. You're just going to get, by asking that quick email back after about a couple of hours, 3 hours, you give them a chance to reflect, but also you're asking permission. What's the best way to do this next? So you're not just going tit for tat. We call it the chimp paradox. One says this, the next goes this, and it's higher and higher. So in emails, don't respond straight away. Ask permission if it's okay to do it by email, or do you want a phone call or a Zoom call, and take it from there.
Good advice, thank you. And yes, we will send out the recording afterwards, everybody that's had that question. We did have a question earlier about two things. One was about different age ranges, and if you're dealing with particularly younger members of staff and colleagues. And the second was around handling conflict with neurodiverse colleagues for ADHD or autism.
Yeah, and I think taking those two in the reverse order, though, I used to work in SEN settings for many years with emotional behavioural difficulty children, parents, and other SEN needs as well. So again, it's about getting that calming time to have that conversation. And when the adrenaline and cortisol is not flowing, when they've got support in the room as well. So you'll often find you need to get the parties together to get a most sort of conducive atmosphere to getting this on the road to getting resolved. So that's very difficult to get it done quickly, but you need to have the relevant parties in there, and everybody have a format where somebody can speak without being interrupted. And again, because you've done this learning now, you'll be the first person not to hijack somebody else. So I think getting all the relevant parties around the table with those neurodiverse people is very powerful, giving that support in the room. And again, it's very difficult to go from there too specific if I don't know the particular thing we're talking about. But often I've been in rooms with social workers, head teachers, and council officials. And it is quite structured. And I think you need that structure of a conversation. Yeah. What was the other question, Jenny, on that the first part of that?
It's around age, actually. Is there anything you do differently if you were handling a conflict with younger members of staff?
Yeah, I think, being 60, 61 next week, some people can see you as an old fuddy-duddy, I suppose, and you don't get the real current world. And again, if someone's a bit younger, I really stretch out and say, well, tell me what it feels like in your situation, with your experience. How does it all come across to you? How are you interpreting your world? Let me into that world so I can understand it. I think I understand, but let me fully understand. Can you share your experiences with me? So again, you're showing that yielding, that empathy, and asking permission for them to share with you. And I picked up something else on the question answer. Somebody said, if you back down too much, somebody rolls over you. And I think, okay, there is a potential challenge there, but I think it's a good place to start. You're not giving in. You're just asking them to share what they think's their opinion. And don't overpromise something. If you overpromise something, you're probably going to underproduce the result. So you don't have to commit to there and then. So if you feel yourself being pushed backwards and you just want to keep them away from you, don't promise something that you can't deliver on. And I think you find that quite a bit when people feel pressurized or even, dare I say, bullied at times. So just buy yourself some more times. Let's revisit this. We need some more information, perhaps. Sit down again and we'll talk about details next time. And that's why I always buy a bit more time, getting some more details together.
Yeah. Perhaps one last question we've got is around instigating the situation. Somebody's asked or said they find that a challenge to instigate.
So to start the process off of having those gentle conversations, confrontations. Yeah. And again, you can turn that Susan Scott thing upside down in terms of 1 to 7 or 7 to 1. You know, something like we've both got a lot to lose here, but being a positive person, we've got a lot to gain. And if we don't have these conversations, or this particular conversation, then I think we're both going to lose. And ultimately, the client might lose, the company's going to lose. And we don't want that. So I'd rather be brave now, and I might use those words from Brené Brown, be brave, and I'd like to hear your viewpoint. So you might start at 7, then go back to 1, if you remember those slides I talked to you about.
Yeah. Can I sneak in 2 other questions?
Yeah, please do.
Never enough time in reviews to do this. How do I make more time for it?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing on reviews, how we deal with people. I'm a big believer that we've got a new platform of online now, but it's very difficult to replace that face-to-face training with somebody, give them these skills in a safe environment. And I think more and more these days, we're in a society where everybody's talking and not as many people are listening. So I think if you can teach these skills to listen, it's very powerful. And I know in education, there is a phrase or a statement going out there that we spend, many, many years, 10, 11 years in education, learning how to read from age 5 to 16, 10, 11 years from 5 to 16, but only about 6 months learning how to listen. So I think there is an opportunity to develop this with staff on face-to-face levels, showing people how to listen. And I think that's something that education doesn't really directly address.
Yeah, and your active listening that we've done before has been really helpful. And one final question, I promise. Your last recommendation for a good book to read on the subject. You've given us some excellent examples of Covey and Scott and Brené Brown. One more.
Yeah, I read books, but latterly, the last few years, I read more. I go on social media and look at something that's contemporary, something that's coming out at the moment. And if you don't want to read, just click on the YouTube and go to just listening skills. There's so many people now doing this. I don't know if you're aware, I do the mental health training, and we talk about listening skills all the time. So if you go on the mental health MHFA website, they have some sort of knowledge bites about listening skills. So that might be something you can do as well, but depends on how you want to learn. But certainly watch a couple of videos online, just put listening skills in. And I don't want to recommend one person or another person, but I've looked at a few of them, and there are some similarities. But just dig into social media, dig into YouTube, have a look, and then see what you think. But I do recommend the Susan Scott thing, because ultimately we can't keep sweeping under the carpet.
Very good advice and recommendations. Thank you, Ross, and thank you everybody. I think we've had a really interactive discussion, albeit by chat, but really good dialogue on this subject, and we're pleased to hear that it's landing with you nicely and it's something you'd like us to continue. So we're grateful to you for giving up your Wednesday lunchtime to spend with us, and I shall end the recording now. Have a wonderful rest of day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.